Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Spouse Link live stream today. Depression, PTSD, and suicidal thoughts are a reality for many military families going through military retirement or transition. It's the ugly product of a 20-year war that we've been dealing with. It manifests in fear, anger, anxiety, and too often it's a hidden fear of the stigma that comes with being labeled, especially when you're on active duty. So now, as your service member or you are going through this retirement and transition phase, old habits are hard to break. We've seen the pain in their silence. We feel the tension and frustration. We've perhaps experienced years of living with a service member that has changed during a deployment time frame. Retirement and transition feel like the first step toward healing. There are no more deployments to be had, no more career changes that are going to be affected by this. But how do we start the very tough and intensely personal conversations that need to be had? So, as a military spouse, do you know how to recognize the signs and support your service member through their healing process? Or what about coping mechanisms for you? Or on the flip side, are you a military spouse that perhaps has some of these feelings and doesn't know quite what to do? Thank you for joining me for another Spouse Link live stream and a topic that is so important, but I wish so many military families never ever had to experience it. I'm Anna Larson. I'm a Spouse Link ambassador for retiring and transitioning military families. I'm also a copywriter and digital marketer by trade, homeschool mom, and I am a retired military spouse as of 1 year. Now, these live streams are for military spouses and military families looking for connection and support as they cross over into that transition and retirement from active duty military world. Spouse Link was created in 2021 by AFMA, the American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association, to support, inform, and inspire military spouses around the world. So as we dive into today's topic, I just want you to please leave me some comments. Let me know who you are and where you're coming from. Share your experiences, ask your questions. We value what you are saying. We're listening to what you're saying. And the topics that I come up with are really based on the people that are here interacting and what they want to know. And we encourage you to interact with our guests and our community as we go. So I am so grateful and excited to introduce my guest today. Dr. Quinn Galloway Salazar. She told me to only call her doctor one time, so I'm going to try and hold to that. That was the one time other than when I read her bio, which I'm going to do right now. So let me pull this up and we will. Okay, so I'm going to move to the next slide and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our guest today, Dr. Quinn Galloway Salazar. She's the founder of In Their Honor LLC and co-principal investigator of the Brooklyn College Veterans History Project. She's a veteran of the United States Army and a spouse to a retired combat veteran. Her work has spanned over the last 2 decades supporting our nation's military and veteran communities. Quinn also serves as an end-of-life doula, a death educator and a suicidologist, a hospice volunteer, and a qualitative researcher. She is recognized as a thought leader in end-of-life career for veterans and their caregivers. Her work has been featured by the International End-of-Life Doula Association, End-of-Life University, the International Doula Givers Institute, and Psych Armor, Behind the Mission. As a result of her dedication, she was recognized as the 2022 State of Georgia's Woman Veteran of the Year. She earned her PhD from Walden University, specializing in industrial and organizational psychology, and she holds a Master's of Arts degree in professional counseling and a Bachelor's of Science in criminal justice. This is an amazing woman. I am telling you, I mean, just the more I read about her, the more excited I am to have her on today. She currently serves on the board of directors for the American Association of Suicidology, Minority Veterans of America, and advisory board of the Veterans Studies Association. So I'm going to pull Dr. Quinn in. And again, I'm not going to call her that doctor throughout the whole thing, but I'm going to pull her in now so everyone can meet her. Hello.
Hi, Anna. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Oh, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited to have you on as my guest.
Oh, Anna, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, there is not enough opportunities that I can just sit and be with those that are military spouses, just like I am. So
Yeah.
to be here, be with your audience, it's a pleasant way to start my Thursday.
It is. I'm throwing this big long topic in because I just want you to know there are already people that are joining us right now that are so interested in hearing what you have to say about our conversation today. This
Yeah,
isn't something we talk very much about, unless you are in the trenches going through it. This isn't something that, I mean, it is a conversation, right?
mhm,
We have social media posts about it. There are articles you can read about it, but actually talking one on one and saying, hey, community, this is happening. This is out there. Let's chat about it. Even if you don't have a lot of experience or know, it's not something that happens. So the fact that you were willing to come on and just say, yes, let's have a real conversation. Let's
yeah,
discuss this. And this is something you do every day. I got to ask, I mean, is
yeah.
it hard? Is it wearing? Is it exhausting? You know?
You know, it can be, but I'm
Yeah,
often reminded of my why, right? And I talk oftentimes about my why and being in the work that I do for a little bit over 2 decades. And there are moments where people are like, but I still smell the Similac behind your ear, Quinn. Like, there's no way that you are old enough to be doing the work that you do. And I'm like, but I am. Um, Here's the thing, Anna. Uh, when I was called to active duty in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, for a
yeah,
period of time, I ran a mailroom. And I was the face that soldiers had the opportunity to see when they were coming to get their mail from their loved ones, from their spouses. And I was the space, the container that they felt safe with to say, excuse my language, I am scared as hell. And I
yeah.
hope while I'm gone, my family has the structure, the support, the connections that they need to thrive.
Mm.
And hearing those stories so early on, I was like 20 years old. I didn't know anything. It caused me to realize that there is a need for people just to talk to others who may look like them, may not look like them, but people that just want to listen. So when you ask the question, is this hard work? It can be, but I
Yeah,
have developed strategies and coping mechanisms to keep myself in check, to know when it's time for me to take a break, to do something to reinvigorate myself. I
yeah,
love art. I love out at the outdoors, and I do those things, and then I jump back in to reengage because the work that I've been called to do is to save lives
ugh.
and to work with others who want to do the same thing. So that's a little bit about my why and why I've been doing this work for 2 decades, which is
So,
absolutely
and
insane.
it's honestly, it's the perfect lead in to really our first question, right? Because when we're when we're having this conversation, I hesitated doing this topic, right? Because I have very limited experience here.
Mhm.
And so uh I know that you have this personal insight, your experience with mental wellness, with service members, and then also just the seriousness of the conversation is a little scary to
Yeah,
approach sometimes, because you don't know the experiences necessarily of the people you're talking with. You don't know how deeply affected their family may have been by this. And so anyways, there is this mindset for many that it's something that other people are going through. I'm never going to have to deal with this, right? And the longer you're in the military, and then when you start through that transition process, you realize, oh, maybe this is something that we're going to be dealing with. We've shuffled it under a rug for so long, but now it's time.
yeah.
So, can we just start off with the why, the big picture why? Like, why do we need to be talking about PTSD, depression, and suicide with our veteran community and military spouses that are part of that veteran community also?
Absolutely. To bring it home a bit, my husband retired after 27 years of serving in 2012.
Okay.
And that first year of retirement, it was the honeymoon phase. Everything was awesome. And then year 2 hit, and I found myself saying, and it's no secret, who who's this? Did I marry the right person? But I also found myself saying, but I'm in this work, right?
Mm,
And you have the opportunity to spend so much time with others, and you think that won't happen to my family. And similar to what you just said, until it does.
yeah.
Um, Thinking about this population and what we know that, since the past 20 years, there's been roughly 30,000 service members and veterans that have died by suicide.
Yeah.
In comparison to the rates of service members that die in combat, those numbers are really alarming.
Yeah.
And there's a vast majority of programs that are out there to say, we're trying to combat mental health and stereotypes and stigma and suicide prevention and postvention efforts. And I can go on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And those are great. But we often forget that the ones who see it firsthand on a daily basis, more often than not, is that spouse, right?
Yeah.
So what are the things that we can do readily to say to spouses, these are some things to look for. Here are some simple warning signs to look for. And if you see these warning signs, it's important to know where the resources are in your community.
Yeah.
When my husband came home, I saw minor red flag, minor things. And the minor things started to add up. And I said, you know what? The vet center will see us both. Let's just drop into the vet center, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. However, here we are, you're in this new role as a veteran. Your uniform is no longer on. Your identity has shifted. Who you thought, who you were for the last 27 years, you're now coming into the civilian world. And guess what? Oftentimes, civilians don't understand our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, how can we transition you and help you develop what your new normal is moving forward? Um,
Oh, I love that. I love that new normal moving forward,
oh,
right? Because being retired is different, or just out of active duty, it is different.
yeah,
You think that it's going to be not so different, or you think that it's going to be this glorious experience, but there are definitely things that you're dealing with where you're like, man, like when you're an active duty family, it's not the same, right? And so
mhm,
anyway, yes, because and you're echoing what my personal experience is, right?
mm,
As a military spouse.
mm,
Uh, when my service member deployed, every time he deployed, he came back just a little bit different, and we figured out a new norm.
yeah,
We figured out a new norm, and just we didn't deal with things because at that point in time, that stigma of mental health needs is strong. And
mhm,
even though I know that the armed forces, the Department of Defense is working on that, as best that they can, maybe right now, or maybe not as best whatever, they're working on it. I'm not going to put a judgment level anyway, one way, shape, or another on it.
right.
Um, but we would create these coping mechanisms for what he had dealt with, but we never talked about it really, and we never really addressed it in our family. It just became a new norm, like what you were saying. And then we had retirement happen. And when we had retirement happen, something I did not expect occurred. He went to the VA, and then now they're putting a rating on his experiences.
Yeah,
And that what opened up this bag of worms that I didn't expect to ever really deal with. I didn't expect that to happen. I mean, the doctors were asking him questions and wanted to know intimate details of things he'd never discussed before.
yeah,
And it opened up, I think, this whole cabinet that he'd locked away in his little brain, right? For my service member in particular, that he didn't deal with. And so I guess I'm saying all of this because really, like, one of the big questions is, what do we do as
Yeah.
a spouse, right? When we see this happening, what are we supposed to say? What's that best practice mindset that we need to have where we know something's going on, but we don't know what it is, and we don't really know how to even ask them about it without it being a triggering conversation, if that makes
Yeah. Oh, that makes the sense that it makes is magnificent.
yeah.
Um, so often when our service members come back from a deployment, we get the PG-13 version of what happened,
Yeah.
right? As you mentioned, it's like they have this container that they store in the back of their head as to some of the things that they may have experienced in combat, or not even combat, just serving, because we know traumas happen in country as well, right here on our soil as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, for sure.
But our veterans oftentimes they lock those thoughts away to protect us, right? It's a way that they want to protect us, to keep us safe. Sometimes they feel as though if I don't share that rated R version, they won't worry as much about me.
Hmm.
And then, as you noted, then it comes time for that VA rating. And I walked a spouse through that several years ago, and she didn't realize, she knew that her husband was injured in theater, came back, but did not know the full details about what occurred.
Yeah.
And his experience in going through the VA disability rating appointments was a trigger for
Yeah.
him.
Same for mine. Yes.
And she called me one day and she said, I don't know what to do, right? He came back from this appointment. He doesn't want to talk. He's angry. He's agitated. And I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. What do I do?
Yeah.
And my tools and my words for her was, one, during that rating period, during that time that he was seeing docs and sharing some of the intimate details of his experience, they triggered emotions for him. Notice his behaviors, notice his mood. What is he talking about? Is he withdrawing from you? Is he withdrawing from the kids?
Yeah.
Give him a little bit of space if that's what you feel that needs to happen, but also let him know you are here and there are resources and people in the community that will be there to support him when he is ready.
Yeah.
And that was the toughest thing for her, Anna, because she wanted to fix it, right? She wanted to fix it in that moment, right? I
So
mean, I
good.
raise my hand too, right? We are fixers, right? By nature, many of us want to fix it immediately. But there's a shift that happens in the brain when a trauma has happened. And that fix it that we want to do doesn't often happen as fast as we think it's going to happen. It takes time. But in the time where you're feeling like, as a spouse, what do I do? Start looking for those resources in your community, right? Educate yourself.
Yeah.
Once that VA rating does come down, and your spouse may have a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress, may have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, may have a diagnosis of major depression. Educate yourself on what that looks like. Educate yourself on, if they start talking this way, these are warning signs. If they start talking about they're a burden or they're hopeless, right? Or that there's no reason for them to live anymore, know that those are warning signs. If you start noticing that their mood, they're agitated, they're hostile, they're wanting to disconnect from everything and everyone that matters, know that that's a warning. Behavior, they're sleeping more, they're drinking more,
Yeah.
substance use is coming into play more, they're eating, they're speeding. Know some of those things that may be a warning sign that your spouse or your veteran is in need of help.
Yeah.
But also, while you're focused on your veteran, it's important as the spouse, and if you have children, to also take time for you, right? It's lonely. It can be lonely. And friends who may be in your community who have not had that military lifestyle may not understand what the heck is going on. They may
Ab-
not understand why you can't hang out on a Saturday night anymore. They may not understand why you're not readily able to drop things at a moment's notice to do something with them. Um, but watch the mask that you wear too, right? Watch your level of social isolation. Watch how you're disconnecting and find ways to do things to lessen that. Because if we don't put our oxygen masks on for ourselves, we can't help our veteran. And if we have kids, it's going to impact our kids as well.
Yes. We've got a whole conversation happening in the comments about children, and we are going to talk about the kids and their role in this in
Yeah.
just a minute. But I just want to say, like, what you're saying, it's so good because I know one of the things. So my service member does not exhibit it through anger, right? There's no dishes being thrown or things like that. He's an isolationist, so I see him withdraw, and that does make it hard. We're actually both very social people, but those going out and hanging out with friends or staying longer than an hour, right? I just see him starting to drain, and the he needs that time to go. He just sometimes I'm like, just go home.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
stay for another hour with the kids and we'll see you later. And it's hit or miss. Some days fine and some days not, right? And so I think that it's interesting to me that it's not just one thing. It's not like there's just a set of things you're going to see and this is what you are going to experience. It's going to change over time as they learn to deal with what it is they're dealing with. And it's going to exhibit itself differently in every single family. And so I love the idea of educating yourself. I know that there are a lot of things on the internet, right?
Yeah.
And not all great. So is there a place where you would recommend people start for that education? Like,
Yeah.
where should they go first? I know the VA has a ton of information, but is there another area?
Yeah, so I will say, and it's a shame, not a shameless, but a plug for Military One Source. Military One Source, since its inception, has always been one of the first places that I go to for information. Um, Another shameless plug, before I founded In Their Honor, I worked for SAMHSA service member veterans and their families technical assistance center. And on their website, there is so much good stuff related to behavioral health, suicide prevention, the needs of military families. And if I ever need just to go back and watch a webinar that has happened in the past few years, I can do that, right? Because all of that stuff is readily accessible and available. Those will always be the two places that I go first. I'm a researcher, so a lot of stuff that I do is scholarly stuff on the other side of the house, but I stay grounded in looking at what like the National Military Association Network is doing and what Psych Armor. How can I forget Psych Armor, right? Um, Psych Armor, you can go on their site and just the abundance of learning modules, right? That you can get from them, and they're short. They're not like, okay, I have to sit here for 90 minutes. They're short,
Yeah.
and it gets you it gives you some insight of some of the things that you may want to know. They have 15 things that veterans want you to know, 15 things that military children want you to know, 15 things that caregivers want you to know.
Yeah.
And wow, how much education can you get by realizing that there are resources out there, but also noticing as you're looking at those resources, wow, I'm not alone. I'm not alone,
Yeah.
right? They didn't create this resource because it happened to just one. These resources and these educational tools have been designed and developed because there are many that are experiencing challenges, um, of retirement and transition. So educate yourself, and please feel free. I know we'll talk later on about how to stay connected, but feel free if there's a way that I can get you to a resource. Let's do that. Vet
Yeah.
centers in your community. Go to
Yeah.
vet centers, reach out to them. They have an abundance of resources at their fingertips to
Yeah.
help military families and veteran families.
Thank you. So, okay, so we're gonna skip around a little bit. Let's
Let's
talk
do
about
it.
kids for a minute.
Oh,
Okay, let's talk about our children because
yeah.
that, like I mentioned, there's a great conversation happening in the comment section where people are talking about the effect of this when it comes to our kids, right?
Yeah.
And so, I know that that's not something it is something that we're thinking about, right? But it's not necessarily the front and center question, right? Because you're thinking, oh, I got to handle the service member first or myself first, or I need to be in a good place. So let's talk about the kids. I've got two kids. They're strong, they're resilient, but they've struggled this past year with this transition thing too,
Yeah.
in different ways than I was prepared for. They've watched their friends leave and they know they're not going this time, whereas before there was always a, well, we're going to be moving too soon.
Mhm.
And so changing the way we think, way we do things and creating a whole new foundational like lifestyle for them. And then having their father in our situation go through this, this event of the VA appointments and figuring out this whole new identity for himself. I mean, when we're talking about the kids, what do we need to be watching for? What do we need to be doing?
Yeah. The same thing that we're doing for our veterans, right? Looking for those warning signs. One of the things that we often share in this work is, you know, when you're going to your kid's pediatrician, right? Are those doctors asking, are you a part of a military or a veteran? Or, are you a part of a military or a veteran family, right? That's important for doctors, your pediatricians to know. In schools, is the question being asked, has a parent served or is serving, right?
Yeah.
So, in thinking about ways that we can advocate for our kids, because normally during those developmental stages, right, they kind of ice us out. I've got an 18-year-old, I've got a 12-year-old, and we have a 7-year-old. And
Yeah.
so they're on different journeys. But I do remember our 18-year-old, right? When my husband would come home and he'd be home for a little bit and she would be on cloud nine, right? Because daddy's home. And then he would leave for another trip and her grades would do this for about a week.
Hmm.
Fortunately, that was maybe second grade, first grade, maybe first grade. Her teacher was a military spouse and she knew the warning signs. And she would say, Dad's home, dad's leaving, because she saw the behavior and the patterns change. Talk to your kids. Be willing to talk to your kids. My husband and my daughter had this conversation that I caught the tail end of over the weekend. And our 7-year-old, she was asking him about his tattoos. And he has one tattoo specifically for his gunner that was killed in combat. And I listened to the questions that she was asking. And at one point I wanted to pull back because she was asking like she's 7, right? So she was asking questions to really tap into how he felt. And I'm like, wow, right? We don't realize how resilient our kids are and what they feel and
Hmm.
what they know. And that night she said to me, wow, mommy, I didn't know that daddy knew somebody that was killed and how it hurt his feelings.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so have these conversations with kids. There are resources like Sesame Street that has
Mhm.
videos that are just designed and developed to talk about things for military kids and transitions and how retirement and how death impacts military and veteran children. Start there. Let that be the tool that you use to start having some of these hard conversations, because the chances are your veteran or your service member knows someone that has died by suicide, that has been injured, wounded, or killed in combat. They know someone, and it impacts them on some degree.
Yeah.
So start having these small conversations. Start them small and be
Yeah.
willing to explore their questions with them so they have a better understanding of some of the things that have happened historically, um, so that they can make sense of it.
I love that last line. And that's really what it's about, right? Helping them understand and make sense of the way things are going, right? Like what's happening in your family, why the service member is behaving the way they are, why maybe you're behaving the way you are, why there might be more arguments or fights within the household,
Yeah.
or withdrawing, or all of those signs and symptoms that you were talking about. I mean, it's echoed in the comments, right? That the children see this.
Mhm.
They're not, it's not like they're blind to what's going on. No matter how much you try and hide it, they see the differences, they feel the change, they feel the tension and the stress in the house. And so I love that what you're saying is don't hide it. Don't try and hide it. Talk to them about it. Have
Yeah.
those conversations with them.
Yeah. I remember I was still in my 20s. So I was able to do, the fun climbing and bending stuff. But I had volunteered for a military kids camp, right? I served as a chaperone. And on one night, I stayed with the girls in their cabin, and they wanted to have a makeup session and do my makeup. And the facial mask and all of these things came out. But in that intimate space, their fears and their worries
Mm,
came out. So if you're a parent, maybe have a coloring night, maybe have a let's make popcorn night, or things that you're meeting them where they are, but it's
mm,
also allowing them the space to open up
yeah.
and to be heard and actively listen. Don't judge them. Actively listen to what they have to say and hold that space and let them know that some of the things that they think or that they're worried about are truly genuine concerns, and they're not made up, right? That they have the rights to feel the way that they do. And when you think about PTSD and you think about um, depression and you think about just other invisible wounds of war, our
Yeah.
military and veteran children, are the hidden helpers, right? They see the residual effects of combat. They see the residual effects of what happens after service. So we have to also ensure that we're putting supports around them as they're growing developmentally, and just wanting to ensure that they're not bottling it all up on the inside, that they have a space that they can share um, what it's like to be a military or a veteran kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
I love that. Thank you so much for those comments. Like I feel like that just hits it's exactly what needs to be happening in more military families, because I recognize now, after the fact, I recognize that when my spouse came home from these deployments and behaved differently, we did not discuss it.
Yeah.
Like I said, everything just got swept under the rug or locked away in whatever the little lockbox was, and we created a new norm. And now looking back, I think, gosh, how confusing that must have been for my
Mhm.
kids at some point, where they're like, oh, okay. But it became a normal for them. Oh, every time dad goes away for a while and then comes back, we do something different then. There's a
Mhm.
new thing created, right?
Mhm.
And so we haven't even started that conversation. I mean, a little bit, but not so much in our house, where I know that there's going to become a point where I need to go back and explore with them a little bit about what they experienced as those military kids, and how they feel about it now, watching
Yeah.
kind of now that we're retired and have created yet another new norm, right? Another
Right.
new way to live, a new foundational base for their life. Like, anyway, it is fascinating to me, and like a whole nother, it's like a whole nother thing, above and beyond your spouse and then yourself as the military spouse, which is
Right.
my next question.
Yeah. Let's do
I
it.
want Yeah, so I want to turn to the actual military spouse, right? So we talk a lot about service members and them dealing with PTSD, them dealing with depression, them having suicidal thoughts. But I did pull up some stats from a Blue Star Family survey that was done. I think it was the 2019 survey was the one that they had information on, and there 11% of military spouses had marked that they had suicidal thoughts over the past year. 11%. I think that is really high. The number for service members was 14%, and I'm thinking, wow, that's not that far off from the number of service members that are having suicidal thoughts. So it's we're not immune to this, right? Like, we as military spouses are not immune to this. So when we're talking about military spouses and the signs to watch for and making sure that our service member is okay, what do we need to be doing for ourselves, and how do we deal for ourselves if we know we're experiencing these kind of traumas or this kind of feeling? And what do
Yeah.
you recommend?
Yeah. A story first.
Okay.
So several years ago, while I was at the SAMHSA, Service Member Veterans and their Families Technical Assistance Center, we had an initiative, and there's two initiatives that come out of that TA center. One is called the Mayor's Challenge. Well, it's the Mayor's Challenge and the Governor's Challenge to prevent suicide amongst service members, veterans, and their families. And we were in Washington, D.C., and we were having all of these sessions. We had cities at that time, they were the mayor's challenges, and we had city stakeholders that came in to develop strategic action plans around suicide prevention.
Mm.
And there was this one woman who stood up and she said, "This is amazing content for the last day and a half. I've learned so much about suicide prevention as it relates to service members and veterans. But y'all have done a poor job in remembering the F in families, because family members are dying by suicide and we're not talking about it."
Yeah.
And Anna, you could have heard a pin drop in the room
Mm.
because she was absolutely right. You could hear a pin drop, but then you could see the light bulbs going off. And what happened in that moment was it shifted the thoughts of how nationally we were looking at this entire system of a family, right? Not just looking at suicide for service members and veterans, but their families, and even more specifically, their spouses.
Yep.
That same woman, I had the opportunity over the past few years to do many, many presentations with her. And we were in Chicago just this April. And we had a 3-hour workshop focused on suicide prevention and military caregivers. And there was a woman in the audience whose husband had died by suicide.
Mm.
What was so amazing was the environment that was organically developed in that space, where she felt vulnerable enough to share what it was like when her husband had suicidal ideations, what it was like when those ideations really resulted into him having a plan and resulting into him taking his own life, and what was like post his suicide. And what we realized, and what we've been realizing, and there are some amazing researchers that are really working hard in this space to look at suicide risks and warning signs for spouses. What we realize is how important being connected and supported is,
Mm.
right? how even as a spouse and you're working so hard on caring for your veteran, you lose your sense of belonging. You lose a sense of your identity. And what can we do in that space to help rid that? It's to stay connected,
Yeah.
right? On various platforms from, Facebook to Instagram to LinkedIn, there's a plethora of spaces where you can connect with other spouses, but even in your communities, right? You may retire out of the military and go into a rural area in whatever state that is going to be your new home base.
Yeah.
What are some things that you can do for yourself? How do you ensure self-care is a priority? Because when we start to care so much about all the other things and we're low on that totem pole, that's when our mental health, that's where our challenges start to arise and bubble up.
Yeah.
So finding those moments where you can have a mindful minute every day, go outside, get some fresh air, walk, color. In my office, I have an entire another desk dedicated to art,
I love that.
right? Because even though my husband no longer serves in the military, my husband's in law enforcement.
Mm.
So it's that second layer of our new normal.
Yes.
So it's finding that time to also figure out who you are, know where resources are for yourself. Who can you confide in? Where's your tribe? Is such a cliche word. I know that it is. But where's your tribe,
Yeah.
right? Where's your personal board of directors that you can call and say to a friend, listen, I just need you to listen. I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to get into the dark with me for about 5, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Sit in the dark with me. It's not easy at first to be vulnerable, to share some of those things. But after a while, there's so much relief in being able to know who your tribe is, to the point where the woman that I was talking about, she's a caregiver and her husband has severe suicidal ideations. And at the time when we were in Chicago co-presenting, he was actually in an inpatient facility.
Mm.
And she said, Quinn, I have friends that if they don't hear from me in about a week and they don't see any movement on my social media, they show up at my house.
Mm.
Right. And I'm like, how impactful is that? Right. To not just have a friend say, what can I do to help? Have someone show up because they know you're not going to ask for the help because you don't want to be a burden. Because some of the culture from the military rubs off on you too, because you also serve and you're adapted to that culture as well, in terms of, I can do anything, I can do it all.
That
Right.
is, yes. Yeah, I love the way you just put that, and the answer is yes. I think I think the military spouse, when they talk about military spouses serving, and I actually just wrote an article on about this, that thank you for your service when it's directed to the military spouse is really about holding down the home front, doing it all, taking care of everything so that your service member doesn't have to worry about what's happening at home.
Yeah.
But there is a huge emotional burden impact that comes from playing that role, from
Yeah.
having that role. And I love what you're saying right now. I mean, it's answering you and I before this live stream had a conversation where one of the questions we talked about was knowing who you are and who cares, right? Like, do I know who I am? And who cares
Mhm.
if I do or don't know who I am? Like, are there people out there who care about who I am?
Oh,
That kind
yeah.
of thing. And so I love what you're saying. It really is about connecting. And that might be your family. That might be the people that live on your street. That might be your military spouse friends that you've known for, however many deployments and moves and whatnot that live far away from you, right? It doesn't have to be like someone in your zone completely, but maybe all those layers are necessary in some part, somebody who
Yeah.
you can go to coffee with, somebody you can talk on the phone with, and somebody you could go stay at their house with, and I don't know, like, but it's so hard, right, to find that community. Like, that's one of the biggest complaints for people as they depart the military life is, I'm so lonely. Like, I
Yeah.
cannot find my community. So do
Yeah.
you have any advice for military spouses as they kind of face that's this transition time frame, as far as like where you find those people that can be there for you, that connection? I'm going to throw this up there. That connection that helps you with that answer to the question, who am I and who cares? Who cares, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Volunteering,
Mm,
right?
that's great.
Volunteering has been a thing where, you know, volunteering has afforded me throughout my time as a veteran and a spouse to figure out who am I at my core. Not who society says I am, not who the military says I am, but who am I? And when I've been able over the years to volunteer in spaces with like minded people, they've become my tribe
Mm,
and they care, right? Um, just to put it on my spouse, for example, because I want to make sure we touch transition too. When my husband retired, he volunteered at the aquarium. Here was this guy that has served like 5 combat tours, right? Was a military police officer, hard skills out the wazoo,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I will never forget one time going to the aquarium and he's bent all the way down with these little kids. And I'm just like, what in the world? But in the time that he was volunteering, he was learning those soft skills and he was able to connect with people who were able to see his heart, right? And so, what I would say is if you have the opportunity to volunteer, what tugs at you? What are you passionate about? Go to those places. If you know that shelters is some place that you want to serve, do it. Organizations like Mission Continues and Team Rubicon and Red, White, and Blue, and they're building houses and you're serving the homeless. You can find your tribe in those spaces because guess what? They have similar experiences to you and they understand to various degrees what the military culture is like. If you are a part of a faith-based organization, do that too, right? Do that. Be able to find those who welcome your experience and be
Yeah.
able to welcome their experience. And what happens in these containers is it often becomes this ripple effect, right? You, as a spouse who may be going through some challenges with your transition, you're able to connect with other people that are going through maybe similar, but maybe different parts of transition. It may be parts that you have graduated from, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes this ripple effect of a community tribe where you're all together supporting each other and knowing that one may be going through, you may be 22, 23 years old and your husband is being medically discharged, right? And here you are, Anna, a spouse whose husband has retired a year in, and there may be things that you can share with that young spouse, whether it be, I don't want to make it gender specific, right? There
Yeah.
may be things that you can share with them that you've learned along your continuum, along your journey, that can help them with their transition. And
Yeah.
that's really what it's about, is how can we connect with others, and truly show genuine connection in your community, in your state, in it on your street.
Yes. I love that so much. And I love the idea that from what I see now, and it excites me, I feel like the military community and the military spouse community is starting to change and shift, where conversations are happening more
Mhm.
frequently, where the expected, I guess, the expectations are starting to change, where military spouses are being given a newer, I'm going to say a bigger, wider space to explore who they are and what they want to
Mhm.
do, and not be so tied and so limited. I'm going to say the word limited, but
Yeah.
limited by the military life journey. I know that in the 20 years that I was involved in this with my spouse, it has changed significantly from when we first started to now. And it excites me. So I love what you're saying, like
Yeah.
finding that thing that you're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be military specific. It can be aquariums, right? It can be about the fish in the sea. It does not have to be about the military.
Nope.
And that's where you're going to find those people that care about you. That
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to find them all over the place, but those are going to be the deep connections that you're talking about, the ones that are going to show up on your door, that are going to understand maybe some of those things that you're dealing with that you wouldn't share with just, your next door neighbor or even maybe your family because they don't
Mhm.
fully understand. That's great.
Absolutely.
Oh, so
Absolutely.
good.
It's
Oh, that's
it's
so good.
it's so good because, you know, if we get it right now, right? If we get it, let me not say all the way right, but if we get it and we start spreading this awareness, generations to come
Yeah.
will have such a better experience than what many of us had, right?
Yeah.
And it takes us because that's our why. We lived it, right? We talked about this whole expert, right? The word expert. That lived experience outweighs experts, right?
Yeah.
I can open up a book and I have several. I probably have one or two on my desk right now as we speak.
Yeah.
And it's this person who has all this book knowledge, has done all this research, but you didn't serve. You don't exactly know what it's like to be a spouse.
Yeah.
And I respect that level of expertise. But when you can walk in and tell me your husband just retired a year ago, you have two small children, they're trying to figure it out. I've My husband has deployed, and I'm making up a fictional character. My husband has deployed 7 times. Wow, how much can I learn from you and your resilience and the fact that you are able to keep your kids are well behaved. They're not, how have you done this? How have you done this?
Yeah.
Teach us. Let's explore that. Let's give a voice to so many military spouses that feel as though they are not empowered, that they are voiceless. It's influencers like us that can stand on the rooftops and say, we are here. If you want to have a virtual coffee meeting, thank goodness for Zoom. Thank goodness for Google Meet. You don't have to go out and drive anywhere. You can do it from the comfort of your own home and connect with someone who just may need someone to listen. You don't
Yeah.
need to have a degree for that.
I love that. No, I love that. And really, as you're saying this, I'm thinking everyone who's listening right now, you are a part of that sphere, right? You are part of that. We're going to use the word tribe again,
Yeah,
that cliche word, right? But we're gonna use that word for just a minute, and we're gonna say you are part of that group.
yeah,
And I think just listening in on these conversations, having these conversations, the comments that we've seen come through today, even the shared experiences within the comments and the vulnerability that was shown about how their children are feeling and what they're dealing with, and opening their eyes to what their service member might be going through as they near that transition time frame, and being more aware of what we go through as the military spouse. All of that is going to, as you said, it's going to empower future generations of
yeah.
spouses. That's a cool thing. Like, that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
I mean,
That's a
that's a big deal.
It's a really big, and you know what? You don't have to put a program behind it. It's just compassion
It
and
really is.
love just at the core of humanity, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to put numbers to that. You could just go to your library and put up a flyer, right? And see
Yeah.
who comes up. And those who come who want to connect will be the ones who connect, right? It's simple acts of just being kind. That we've experienced it. Why not share what we've learned? Why
Yeah.
not share our lessons learned with those that are coming up behind us, whose spouses are getting ready to retire in the next year or so, right?
Yeah.
Find out where your tap, your tap, uh, um, sessions are going to be, right? If
Yeah,
yellow ribbon is still happening in your community, find the opportunity to, get on the schedule and share your perspective, right? It- it's little things that we can do that will have monumental impacts for the future.
absolutely. Absolutely. This has been such a good conversation. Thank you so much
Good.
for sharing your experience, your thoughts behind it, your wealth of knowledge, your educated opinions, I'm going to say, because this is your area. I know you don't like the word expertise, but this is your area of study. We'll say that area of study. So I mean, I would just say you know more than the average Joe. We'll just put it that way.
No.
But I do want to make sure that we throw this up for
Yes.
anyone that is watching today.
Yes.
Um, just in the last month, they created the 3-digit number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And it is 988 is the new number. Now you can still call the 1-800 number. You can still text to the 741-741 if you want. Those are all still available, and they're going to, you're going to get routed over to the 988. But we now have this amazing 3-digit for anyone that is in crises, or if you just need to talk, if you need to talk things through. And Quinn has given us some awesome resources with the Vet Center and Military One Source and Phantom Warriors and all of those different programs. There is no lack of people who are willing to support you and your family at whatever level of this journey you might be in currently. And always feel free to reach out to me if you need to make that connection. If you just need a place to start, I just want to throw myself out there. I'm not an expert in this area in any way, shape, or form, but I am a listening ear, and I am a military spouse that's been part of a long-term military family. And I've lived some things, so always available as far as that goes. And then Quinn, can you please let people know how they can connect with you if they would like to connect with you further?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely my website. You can go there. You can complete a submission there. That's super informal. I'm gonna say that it's super informal. Feel free to go all the way down. Shoot me an email. I respond to my emails. If you want to send me a message on Facebook, if you want to become a friend on Facebook, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, I truly believe the only way that we can save lives is walking our walk, right? So if there's a moment that you say, hey, I just want to, can we do virtual coffees? I
Yeah.
do virtual coffees with people all the time. It's just who I am. If you want to do a virtual coffee, email me. I'll set it up. We can talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. I'm
Oh,
not taking notes. At the end of the day, it's truly about seeing people, letting them know that they're being heard, letting them know that they matter. And if I can be that for any of your audience members, I'm an email away.
oh, you are amazing. If
Oh,
nobody has told you that today, you are an amazing woman. And
oh,
just
thank
just
you.
that offer, that in and of itself, I just gave me little chills, little
Yeah.
tingles. I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And to all of your audience members, thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you for
Yeah.
loving us. Thank you for being who you are. You are not alone. You are not alone. And whatever that and I'm doing a plug for you. Whatever we can do to support you on this journey, we're here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, and those are wonderful final words to end our conversation on. Thank you to everyone that's joined us here today. Thank you for all the great comments. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the questions. Thanks for just participating in this and creating that space, empowering military spouses. All the things that we talked about today. I feel like I could go through this long roll of and this and this and this and this, but I'm just going to end it with all the things, right? All the things. So we will see you at our next Spouse Link live stream. Quinn, thank you again for being our guest. And I hope that you get some connections and some people that take you up on that offer. I know that there are many that probably need it or are looking for that next step. And so we just really appreciate you. And so,
Absolutely. Thank
everybody,
you.
yes. Yeah. We're just going to say goodbye, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Well, Friday and then the weekend, but rest of today and then the weekend time frame. And we'll see you at our next Spouse Link Live. Thank you so much for joining us today.